What is going on, Misfit coaches? Team Misfit HQ back in studio for another edition of the Coaches Podcast. Today we are going to be going into kind of a moderately deep dive into the upcoming training phase for affiliates. But before we do that, we're going to talk about the Open, and a little bit on quarterfinals, but a little bit more about the Open. How do you guys think it went? We had a pretty good. Old Team Misfit HQ had a pretty good showing.
Yeah, I mean, you probably have the number better than I do, but I would guess someone that I heard about
19.
Let's say 18 was my guess. So 19 athletes qualify out of this gym, and then our second location in Wyndham, we had one coach, one athlete for the Open division, and then we have a couple of masters that qualified as well. So to have upwards of 20 athletes between the two facilities qualify for quarterfinals, we're talking around to other athletes and other gyms. It's like, hey, we got like 2 or 3 of these folks in there. So kind of testament to their commitment to the programming, coming in and day out, hitting workouts with the intensity that, is required to make progress. It's kind of a little pat on their backs to see them have a chance to go out and compete, and made for a really fun weekend here. I mean, it was a little bit of a madhouse Thursday, Friday. Workouts were released early for quarterfinals, so a little crazy around here. And are these going to be the workouts, or are they not going to be the workouts? And, it was just a really fun environment. And I think, as chaotic as it was, the athletes themselves really enjoyed the ability to kind of throw down with their buddies in a stage of qualification that you have to earn your right to get to. Kind of felt like almost like running regionals at your own affiliate. So a really fun event, I thought.
Yeah, and we had a team qualify out of the Open for the team quarterfinals, which will now be coming up this coming weekend. And something that we kind of like went back and forth quite a bit on is how we selected that team. And I think it's like worth talking just briefly about for other affiliates, because ultimately the way that an affiliate team gets selected is, well, they have to create you have to create that team, and then athletes can add themselves to that team, to the team roster that the affiliate created. But I know a lot of affiliates kind of do it where it's just like athletes create the team on their own, which is terrific. But if that's the case, then we have a lot of people who are interested in doing that. And if it becomes like people picking friends, picking each other, then it can turn into something that's a little bit that's more stressful than it is fun. So we basically said, like, okay, we have a pretty good shot, I would say, at sending one very, very strong team through quarterfinals, and hopefully we'll find out to a semifinal. But we're gonna say that if you want to be on the team that is going to hopefully move forward, you're gonna kind of try out by doing the individual quarterfinals workout. So those athletes did the Open. They also did the individual quarterfinals this past weekend, and then kind of using the Open worldwide leaderboard, the 3 fittest women at the gym, 3 fittest men, the 2 primaries and an alternate got got the thumbs up that's going to be the team for the team quarterfinals. So that's just a good potentially something for affiliates to think about as far as like kind of continuing to get engagement. And I think like our plan is to if the team were to advance to a semifinal, we'd have at least, a handful of weekends of team training. And those are going to be opportunities to get other athletes who aren't necessarily part of the team, but have potentially, team aspirations, or just, like doing, like fitness as more than just like, oh, I have to do this to stay healthy. Like it's a little bit of a hobby for them. There's places for them to get involved too.
I think 2 things were accomplished the way that you decided to. We kind of let you run point on that, because I know that's something you're like passionate about, is coaching, especially when it comes to like higher level competitions. I think there are 2 really good takeaways from the way that we did it. One, by making one large team as opposed to letting people pick their friends, there's no fracturing of the community where so-and-so wasn't picked, or like, the odd man or woman out who doesn't get to get on a team and maybe they think they're less than. That could be really discouraging, as opposed to being like, nope, the affiliate is one large team, everybody who wants to compete. This is the team that you're on. And this is a good way to make things, as fair as possible, because people aren't picking their friends or, keeping someone out.
Right.
And then 2, it's very objective. Another thing that we really want to make sure is that, in the past, we've sent a team from our affiliate CrossFit MF to regionals, and because it was a little bit more open-ended and the only thing we had were open scores, and realistically we had 4 men and 4 women kind of competing for 3 spots apiece, that it ended up leaving a sour taste in someone's mouth when they didn't get selected because, there wasn't an objective measure of like why you are or why you aren't in the team. It's, we felt like this was the best way or this is the best play, and we've sort of learned from that in the past. And I think that the method of making one large team keeps everything like fair, and the objective scoring also keeps things fair. So there's no fracturing of the community and there's no ill will kind of left or right there. And for a lot of athletes, the vibe in the gym isn't like, oh shit, I didn't make the team. It's, what, I have to do this, and this upcoming year, and I'm going to put a better foot forward so that I'm not, disappointed because I didn't get picked for the team, when it's honestly only person's fault is my own for maybe, not training with intensity or not hitting the stimuli I need to, or not spending enough time with skill sessions. So there's some really big takeaways for those athletes who are kind of knocking on the door but didn't get there this year. And I think that's kind of a sort of a nice segue into, I think, what we're going to be talking about ahead of the nuts and bolts of the programming. Yeah,
I think making it as objective as possible, where it's not like, oh, coaches picking team members, like, even as a coach, as objective as you might think you are, if it's the case where you're potentially leaving somebody out. I think it's also better for the athlete, because it just says like, hey man, hey
Bob,
hey Bob,
hey woman,
hey athlete, here's, this is where you finished. Like, we're taking the top 2, you finished 3, 4, whatever, and then have the conversation about what you need to work on, which is kind of the topic of today. So to get off the kind of quarterfinals, train or railroad tracks and onto the open side of things, we're gonna kind of go through each week of the open workout briefly, with the goal of saying like, hey, if you have an athlete who's looking back at their open scores and is just like, what do I need to do to improve? Basically, how do I interpret my open scores, and whether they were, in that top 10% who moved on to quarterfinals, or they're just kind of a regular member who just comes in, likes to work out 3 to 5 days a week. We don't need to be comparing them where they are like on the total leaderboard. We can just look across their 3 open workout scores and be like, wow, interesting. Why was 22.1 so much lower than 22.3 and 22.2 and 22.3? So that's where we're going to start. We're going to talk a little bit about that, and then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of the upcoming training phase for Team Misfit affiliates. But let's kick it off with 22.1. So for those of you with a goldfish memory, that was our 15-minute AMRAP of box jump overs.
I was hoping you'd do it again for me.
Dumbbell snatches and wall walks. You don't want to go back to
like
it?
a goldfish memory. So you're speaking to me.
So you have an athlete. They come to you, they're just like, hey coach, what do I need to do for this upcoming year? Maybe it's that athlete who didn't make the quarterfinals team, something like that. What do I need to do? And you look across their open scores and you see like, oof, you took a lot of points in 22.1. What are we telling them?
I mean, right off the bat, for those athletes that are competing, and again, we try to use, at least I try to use, what does the best athlete in the world look like when doing a workout? Because that's kind of like the pinnacle of what the sport will be, and kind of what we should be having athletes kind of inching towards as they go with their training. So straight up, we have a cardio piece. We've got 15 minutes of 3 movements that are at a dose that should not really get you stuck at any one point, where the game is transitions and kind of consistent speed from start to finish. So, if you were to read one of our workouts from Team Misfit, that's exactly what we call a cardio workout. So with those 3 wall walks, 12 dumbbell snatches, and 15 box jump overs, it's, can you stay moving without really ever standing around for a significant portion of time? And, if you aren't someone that's finding yourself able to do that, there's a good nod to the programming that, if I see cardio stimulus in the programming, I need to make a better attempt at making sure that I have a dose, or I work with my coach to have a dose that allows me to stay moving, because it's clearly evident that, maybe I like a different type of stimulus, and when it's asked to go round and around and around, I really, really struggle with that. So, I want to make sure that you go to your coaches, as an athlete, or the athletes look to find their, coaches try to find their athletes who are out there and say, all right, I saw this athlete, they came to me, had a conversation after the open, after quarterfinals, and they're like, I really got stuck by 22.1. you work together as a team to make all those workouts that are supposed to be cardio workouts truly cardio, so that you're looking around in the gym as you're coaching. You're like, all right, Steve's not standing around again. He's able to move the entire time. He is thus going to be able to improve his cardiovascular output, and as a result, do better in a test like 22.1.
Yeah, I think the kind of talking about the scaling side of that, those kind of workouts can be tricky because a lot of times the numbers are already pretty low when we're writing those cardio pieces for affiliates. Those numbers are already low. The weights are usually pretty light, or if it is like a heavier weight, it's like 1 to 3 reps, something that even though it's heavy isn't going to get them stuck for super long. And because the numbers are small, the weights are light, athletes see that as like, oh, look, it's a workout that I can do as prescribed. And that's fine sometimes. And sometimes the athlete needs that, maybe a little bit of that confidence boost, whether it's for their own fitness or maybe more for their ego and just
their
like
head,
having a good day at the gym sort of thing. But as coaches, we have to remember, like, if that barbell is really light, like, there's a reason it is, and you need to be thinking about how the workout might play out in your head for that athlete. And then, again, help them. They may actually benefit from scaling something that looks like it doesn't need to be scaled, but actually will benefit their fitness more by actually scaling it to ensure that it is a cardio type stimulus.
And, without getting to the whiteboard and belaboring points for, 15 minutes or so, you should be able to communicate that to their athlete. Like, just because you can do the 95-pound thruster that's in this workout, if it's supposed to be a cardio stimulus and 9 95-pound thrusters is going to put you in a grave, like, make it a 75-pound bar. I mean, this is a conversation I had just the other day with an athlete regarding a workout that I think had a loaded barbell at, 105 or 115. And I was like, 115 is just the general prescription. We need to find your version of 115. And that's kind of the way to think about this, because you're right. Oftentimes, if it were 2 strict handstand pushups in a cardio piece, like, all right, I can scale it to 1, or like, what do I do there? And sometimes 1 is the right answer, and sometimes it's all right, the pressing is the problem, or maybe the handstand positioning is the problem. So we're gonna have you find the biggest gap in their game when it comes to that stuff, and make a small adjustment so they really feel the way they're supposed to feel. Because at the end of the day, the reason why maybe we don't say stimulus in workouts a lot, we say feel, is because that's something that athletes can relate to a little bit better than the word stimulus. Yeah. So use that terminology and help build your athlete's IQ, because a lot of times even like high-level performers don't truly have a good grasp on what stimuli is or how feels are supposed to go. And as coaches, that's our job, to help make them understand that if you see a cardio piece, I don't want to look around and see you standing around very much. Like, there shouldn't be no standing around here. So, I think that's a big part of what we do as coaches, and to make sure that, you're not going after attacking someone and saying, I know you can do 95 pounds, but you'll get a better workout and a better feel. You'll get the intended feel with that 75-pound barbell.
Yeah, for sure. And just like these kind of workouts, especially when they're programmed at the affiliate level, the cardio thing is really important, because it's more of like when we're programming, we're not only like thinking about necessarily the feel of the workout, but what kind of energy system we're training. And if you're a coach and you're not familiar with like kind of our 3 energy systems, like, you got to educate yourself and make sure that you're tracking on what that means. And when we have that cardio stimulus, those are the of the 3 kind of stimuli or feels that we put out there. That cardio version is like, hey, you should be moving for the entire time that the clock is running. And those are the things that, honestly, like, the average person need the most. It's like, you don't need to get stuck at a barbell. If you're coming into exercise for 1 hour a day, like, you're already only moving around for a small portion of that. And if the workout, the time that you're actually supposed to be spent exercising, is also fractioned into time not spent exercising, like, you're not maybe moving the needle for that person as much as you could be.
And the action step there, in addition to scaling workouts to make sure their cardio is one feature of the Team Misfit programming, that was something we've included, kind of adopting down from Misfit Athletics, is the maffetone work. Getting athletes on a machine and having them go at 180 minus their age for 45 minutes continuously on a machine after a good warm up there and a kind of a good mobilization session. So they're kind of getting all they can from that session. But, if you're looking to help an athlete move the needle, sometimes it's not movement specific. It's energy pathway specific,
Yep,
and they're just
very
underdeveloped in this aerobic capacity. So, one of the staples that I think we're going to include for a very long time moving forward, because of how much benefit we've seen firsthand in our affiliate and our elite athletes from Misfit Athletics, is that Maffetone method. You'll see that on there. I believe it's day 4, which is Thursday for most gyms.
Yep.
Do that stuff. If you're going to give an athlete, of all the things they could potentially choose from at the end of the week, obviously you can pick things based on perceived weaknesses, but there are very few athletes in the world that would not benefit from more aerobic work like Maffetone.
Yeah, unless you have an athlete who's already got kind of that aerobic, just a freak. They're like, oh, I'm a triathlete and I'm trying to get stronger. It's like that might not be necessary for them, but just
Rare
about
case.
everybody else, absolutely.
Just before we move on that point, or on this topic of keeping it cardio, having you have an athlete who really wants to work on handstand push-ups, and you say you have a workout like you mentioned that's like 2 in it every single round. And they're like, well, I really want to practice, but they might be stuck doing, supposed to take them 10 seconds to do 2 reps, and they're there for a minute. That's not going to hit the stimulus. Kind of just maybe giving them something they can work on outside of class to kind of work on that skill, but then allow them to still kind of work that energy system and get better at those cardio.
Yeah, like
movements.
scratch that itch outside of intensity. Because
yeah.
again, we don't want you to shy away from movements. Like, we're not saying, make everything a cardio workout and just get rid of muscle ups and bar muscle ups and handstand pushes, because they're not cardio movements. They can be when delivered in a correct dose, when you have an appropriate fitness level. So if you have an athlete because that does happen quite often, even at our affiliate, we sell programming to other gyms across the world, and, looked at it as someone who has, knows what we're talking about. And even we get pushback at our gym knowing that. And that's a common, conversation you have with an athlete, is like, I really, really want to be able to do this movement. It's like, here, I'm going to give you something you can do afterwards. And again, that helps build that athlete-coach relationship, because they know you got your back. Like, a hard thing for some athletes to understand is that when we modify things, it's not because we don't believe in you. It's because we want you to feel what the workout's supposed to feel like. And if we can give them some alternative paths outside of class to kind of close the gap on those things, you're going to build a better relationship with your athletes. And that's how you get them to buy in and trust, and how that trust expands from 1 athlete to 3 athletes to your entire gym, kind of believing, Coach Kyle has my back because he helped me get my bar muscle up so I could put them in workouts.
Cool. Okay. 22.2. So this was our 10-minute cap of
cardio, right?
1 up to 10 and then back down to 1. I thought so. It was great. No.
My favorite of the 3.
Same. Of deadlifts and bar facing burpees. So I think just to kick it off a little bit, the 10-minute cap changes things a little bit as far as like how athletes like shook out on the leaderboard when we're thinking like affiliate level athletes. To go back to your original point for the higher end athlete, it was a gas tank workout, but we also have to acknowledge that when it comes to the open and affiliate level athletes are pushing themselves a little bit, there's the possibility that barbell just got so heavy that it was kind of a muscle overload sort of thing, where I have to wait a couple seconds before I can do another deadlift. And that's perfectly fine. I would say that in that scenario, that athlete is more than likely somebody who was probably a scaled athlete much of the time in class, and we're just maybe reaching a little bit in the open because it's a test, and that's great. But when we're thinking about how the workout kind of goes, and just for the purpose of the conversation, it was definitely meant to be a gas tank workout.
Yeah, and when we're thinking gas tank, we want the stimulus to essentially create so much metabolic fatigue that you're just forced to stop. Like, you just physically so uncomfortable that you want to keep going. And I got a great example is like, after you finish the 21 and 21 in Fran, you go back to the thrusters and you're like, fuck, I'm doing 15 singles on this thing because I'm just cooked. So, creating that stimulus is important. And, for a lot of athletes, it's not really their favorite. It's just it's a very uncomfortable place to be because of, the heart rate's in the throat. And, if you're wearing a Whoop, it's at 1,200 beats a minute. You need to create that stimulus with athletes. And what's tricky is sometimes it's not as easy to figure out what movement that might be, because for some athletes, it might be the barbell. If you ask me what I felt about 22.2, I'd say it was those burpees, the metabolic overload of pressing my fat ass off the floor over and over again was pretty challenging. But finding that that stimulus is tricky, but you need to go there. And we work all the time on this metabolic pathway when it comes time to do things like short machine intervals. That's a great way to develop this capacity. And if again, taking sort of the skill element out of a workout, because sometimes that can be prohibitive and turn what should have been a cardio into muscular overload, or a gas into a muscular overload. It's a really easy way to fall in that trap. So, there's a lot of opportunity throughout the season to work on those things. And for a lot of athletes, that means, putting yourself in the black hole and seeing what happens when you come out the other side. But that is how you're going to develop that energy pathway. And then you have to always ask yourself, is there something about the way I'm moving that's creating extra unnecessary fatigue? And if I tidy those movements up, can I make it so that, the deadlift doesn't put me in the ground and during something like 22.2?
Yeah, this kind of workout has a few different places where we can help an athlete. Let's kind of ignore a little bit of the that deadlift is just it's 70% of my 1 rep max. That might be the case for some athletes, but again, that athlete is more than likely we're scaling them fairly often during class, and they just need to continue to get fitter. They need to continue to come to class, just bring their overall fitness level up. Once we're talking about kind of the RX level athlete, when we're thinking about improving that, we need to be thinking about a couple different things. I think the interval thing is a really good point. When you have a workout in class, especially with low skill, again, thinking about it from an energy system perspective, you have to give athletes the encouragement or tell them hey, you got to go faster. And looking at when the whiteboard says the pacing is reach, we need to have a version of the workout that enables an athlete to reach both either in movements, if it's a more of the workout is kind of has a movement that's kind of the crux of the workout, or if it's just kind of how hard can you work? We need to be encouraging those athletes to push themselves a little bit to develop that kind of, what I would say is probably the kind of that anaerobic, that lactate threshold. Because for a lot of athletes, it was I came out hot, and it turns out the buildup of whatever, maybe it was blood lactate was just too much for me to clear. And I just I just blew up. So I think that's one thing that we can do. And then the other thing is the maffetone work. This applies to that athlete as well. If you are, the benefit to that maffetone type stuff is that we teach the body to flush waste more efficiently, cumulative lactate that builds up. And in CrossFit workouts, that's basically the limiting factor as you get fitter. It's just how long can you survive in a really uncomfortable time zone, or an uncomfortable state of existence. Yeah. So encouraging athletes to spend time on the machine at a lower intensity, but also making sure that they remember that when it comes time to reach on their pace, so to speak, or send, that they are really hammering it.
I also think there's a sect of your community that may come from, we alluded to the triathlete background, who really double down and love those cardio workouts, but want to turn every workout into a cardio workout.
Yep.
There are going to be very specific times where you get thrown a 30-pound wall ball for a handful, or a 70-pound dumbbell, or today's class workout had 5 power cleans at 225. If an athlete's oh, coach always says scale, get a good workout, and you turn that 225 into a 135, and that's nowhere near the percentage we're looking for, you completely change the stimulus. Then you can't be surprised when you go to something like the open and they throw you a 225-pound deadlift and you just can't move it. You can't manage that fatigue because you never put yourself in that heart rate zone, that level of discomfort. So, modification and scaling can go in both directions. It doesn't always mean make things easier. For some athletes, they get so programmed in making things cardio workouts that it's hard to have that conversation the other direction. Another example would be yesterday's hang power snatch toe to bar workout. We have athletes who are how light should I go? And I was you should be able to do X amount of reps with it, but you got to hang on to it, because with this stimulus, muscular overload, specifically with that workout, we're trying to get you stopped because your muscles are come on, dude, I can't go anymore. So really understanding those stimuli is important, and figuring out how, like you said, kind of playing the workout in your head of how it should go is a very effective strategy as the coach ahead of your class, to make sure you've kind of thought about every single person and been all right, this person needs this version of that weight. This person needs that version of this weight. And that's a really effective strategy for making sure that you kind of check the box for everybody, because our gym is eventually large group personal training. We got to be thinking about these things ahead of time so that we're giving our members, the stimuli they need to see the progress they want to have in the open.
I was thinking about another part of yesterday's workout, but it was the extra piece, the rowing intervals, the 200 meter slash 175, I think it was 5 of them. And you were coaching class, and you explicitly gave the directions. If you struggle to go there, you need to go there today.
Yeah.
And full out send. So I think that that's something as coaches, we have athletes that, see the feel or the or pacing on the board, but they might not really understand what that means, and they get into it and they just kind of go through the motions. But as a coach, I think it was, pretty powerful just for myself and being a coach, but I was an athlete in that situation. It was like, okay, so that means I really got to hammer this. It's only going to be a short amount of time, but that's what coach is telling me to do. So it's time to go.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good example as well. Okay. 22.3, our high skill. Everybody was all concerned until 22.3 that they wouldn't get to show off their gymnastics work. And then they got to, and then they were disappointed.
What a great story.
Not everyone. Lots of folks. No, that's, I say that because we are constantly around athletes who are have high expectations of themselves and think that they did poorly, even though they didn't do poorly. Then we've got our plenty of athletes who are just yeah, I got my first bar muscle up, or first 5 since having a kid, having a baby, something like that. But this was a muscle overload sort of thing for just about everyone on the very upper end. Even the highest level athletes had to stop somewhere. Although a lot of them didn't stop very much, but
very long.
For the rest of us, the rest of us mere mortals, it was, hey, I need to strategize this thing through to make sure that I can do my pull-ups. I can do maybe my chest to bar pull-ups. And then most importantly, how many, or can I get through all of those bar muscle ups? And oh yeah, that thruster bar isn't to be ignored. So we've got definitely a muscle overload sort of piece, but I think this, like any workout, there's obviously a combination of everything, of all three kind of feels at play. So how do we get an athlete better in a 22.3 scenario? I did really well in the first 2 workouts, but I got smoked by 22.3.
Again, this is kind of a nod to understanding the stimulus here, but when muscular overload's kind of in front of you, you have to effectively manage the fatigue right up to your threshold and not go past it. Otherwise you get stuck and you're standing around for an unnecessary amount of time here. So, in the example of this workout, maybe it was the heavy barbell that you press out one too many times with your arms and you didn't use your legs and you couldn't thrust it any longer, or you were really excited at the start and you did 21 unbroken pull-ups and you go to the chest to bar and you're doing singles. So I think the biggest thing here is movement efficiency. We talk about it all the time. We try to deliver a lot of, Team Misfit tip videos for coaches trying to help their athletes to be better movers so that they don't get stuck as often, because the fittest athletes, one of the things I think you actually wrote an article for Misfit Athletics about was that, they move so well and have such a developed energy capacity in all of those different types that they're able to turn almost every workout into a cardio workout. Well, for us mortals, it's understanding that, to try to bridge that gap, what is the limiting factor right now? And for most athletes in that workout, it's their skill. They don't move well enough early enough, or they're not thinking about what's going to happen in the second and third round of that workout, and they get a little overextended because they're feeling excited, and then they're stopped. So, a big way to kind of make a noticeable improvement in this is doing an EMOM. And one of my favorite ways to do that is a little ladder, where the first minute you do 1 rep, the next minute you do 2 reps, and then the next minute you do 3 reps. And that can be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It could be 2, 4, 6, whatever like that. But the idea here is you do a chunk of volume that is appropriate for where you are currently, where the idea is not breathing heavy, ripping your hands. It's what little things can I clean up? Can I keep my legs longer in my kip? Can I make sure that I do the chest to bar pull up behind the bar and I'm falling into my next rep? Or, am I making sure that if I'm using a barbell that I'm actively using my legs to thruster that bar up overhead so that I'm not pressing out with my arms? So, this is another nod to the thing we were talking about earlier with the handstand push-ups in a workout. Like if someone's max set is 2 handstand push-ups, that cardio workout that's supposed to be cardio is now muscular overload. So what should they do? They should go outside of their workouts and work on the skills there and be like, is it my upper body strength? Is it my skill? Because there are many different factors that could present the muscular overload. It could be your strength. It could be your skill. It could be both. But taking the time to do that outside of intensity is the best way to kind of make noticeable improvement when it comes time to improve that muscular overload capacity.
Yeah, the other thing that I was thinking is that this workout. So up to that point, there was no, pretty much all of the movements enabled athletes to play along, and that's kind of the maybe part of the inclusive nature of the Open, especially over the last 2 years. But once we get that gymnastics movement, that kind of higher skill gymnastics movement, and athletes get stuck, one of the most difficult conversations you might have to have as a coach is saying, hey, is it possible that the reason you couldn't pull yourself up over the bar is because we need to be making changes outside of the gym with nutrition and lifestyle. Athletes come all the time. I had a conversation with a couple athletes at the gym yesterday. It's just like, how do I get better at these pull-up? How do I get better at pull-ups? It was for followers, we were doing the 90 seconds of chest to bar pull-ups. And I told athletes, if you cannot proficiently do repeated sets of kipping pull-ups, or you cannot do a single strict pull-up, today you're going to do strict pull-ups. We're not even going to bother with the skill. And I had athletes come up after. It's just like, how do I get better at kipping? I was just like, how many strict pull-ups can you do? 0. Start there. And then the follow-up to that is like, we looking at an athlete who physically needs to increase their lean body mass to body weight ratio? Are they carrying around excess body fat, basically, with trying to be a little bit sensitive there? But that's the thing. Athletes come in, especially if they maybe have an athletic background or are athletic enough to learn how to kip, learn how to kind of game around having I can't do strict pull-ups, but I figured out how to use my hips and my shoulders haven't fallen off yet. So I am qualified to do kipping pull-ups. And it's like maybe we'll see how long that lasts. Your ceiling is a lot lower, that's for sure. So for me, the EMOM thing, that's terrific. Like if it's a movement efficiency thing, we need to take those movements that's made athletes stuck, take them out of the Metcon and say like, hey, this week you're going to do 2 perfect kipping pull-ups every minute for 10 minutes. Next week you're going to do 3 every minute, and then 4, or the 1, 2, 3, kind of the death by style that you said. But pulling those out of intensity and really encouraging the athlete to focus on movement efficiency and doing the movement correctly. Because if they can't do it correctly outside of intensity, like, I don't know why would we think that they could do it well after 40 thrusters?
And that's our job too. Again, it is a difficult conversation. I understand where you're coming from there. You don't want to be like, hey, sorry, bub, you're a little too chunky to do those pull-ups. Like, that's not a fun conversation to have. But, one of the things we are trying to do is create a well-rounded athlete. If that person who comes to you probably loves your barbell day and does not like gymnastics skill day. It's like, we are trying to create the holistic human being that's ready for anything here. So, it's good on you that you come and ask me the question about how to get better at this, and I'm going to try to give you the answer in the most empathetic way possible. But, you have to have some level of ownership there. And some of these things, do create kind of uncomfortable conversations, but you have to be willing to help people with that. And when you are able to have those conversations and there's, the emotions not attached to it, they realize you're there for their best experience, and, you're there with the best intentions. And, maybe that conversation ends kind of awkwardly, but 2 weeks later, you see them posting about their food on Instagram. You've made a noticeable change there. And sometimes being the coach doesn't always mean you're the good guy. Sometimes you have to be a little bit of the bad guy there, and that's an okay thing to do. You just don't want to always be the asshole in the room. Like, there's a middle zone to live in there.
Yeah, and if you're a coach, you have that knowledge. Like, it's almost like if you omit telling an athlete whose problem is like, if it's like, hey, I'm trying to fix this, I'm trying to fix that, and you don't want to address the honest truth that, like, hey, you need to change the things outside of the gym if you want the progress. Like, what are you doing? Like, that's your job.
Yeah.
Or you can think of it as like, if the CrossFit coach, who they're literally paying me in some instances multiple $100s a month for their fitness, and like who else is qualified to tell this person? Like, they're not going to go to their their husband or wife and say like, does this sports bra make me look fat? Like, and it's like, no, of course not. It looks great. Like, who else in their life is going to tell them like, hey, if you want to make a measurable change, it's actually going to start with like improving your diet and that sort of thing. Like, you are the maybe the only qualified person in their life to have that conversation with them. So do it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that the open, again, we should, as coaches and as, gym owners and, programmers, need to be thinking about like, all right, how do I make sure that I hit these stimuli? Because the open is such a great time to create a community in your gym. And if you aren't doing that, please, please, please jump on the train. It's a really great way to make your gym a much tighter community, and that's going to make your business better. But that does mean, like any good family, you're going to have some difficult conversations. And, if you're willing to get past the awkwardness of that and really help people, they're going to see that you're out there for their best interests. And while, you might not retain 100% of those conversations, or those people after those conversations, most of your members will understand that you're coming from a place of like love and you're trying to help them be better. And, sometimes that means a hard conversation.
Yeah.
Nuts and bolts time?
Nuts and bolts time. So that's the open wrap up. Now we're going to talk baseline training phase 1. So just to give, if any of you who are not subscribers or listening for the first time, it's important to realize that the open, which we just kind of wrapped up, that's what we peak for. That's our Super Bowl. It's not necessarily because we're a affiliate program where we're trying to turn affiliate athletes into CrossFit Games athletes. The open just serves as a really good kind of like, if you're trying to get better at something, well, you should have a goal to work towards. And the open is our aim for
good
the
benchmark.
Year. Which also means once the open is over, that we are the farthest away from the next year's open, and it's time to kind of reset. And the entire affiliate program is built a year at a time, meaning that we kind of sit down and decide, each training phase, how the next training phase builds on the previous one. And we also make sure that nobody's losing any fitness. We don't go into a strength only phase over the summer. We don't tell everybody, hey, you're going to gain 20 pounds of muscle, but you're not going to be able to run a mile without stopping. We're not going to sacrifice fitness for one very specific area, but we are going to focus on different areas kind of every 6 to 8 weeks, depending on how often the new training phase starts. So we've got baseline 1, our high CNS lift, or high central nervous system demand. Basically, we're trying to get people strong, is the deadlift. This previous week, we actually had affiliates test their 1 rep max. So if athletes don't have a 1 rep max, or like a recent one, you can talk to them about maybe the best day to have them test that, or a pretty recent 1 rep max is pretty much good enough. I would say this phase doesn't rely heavily on percentage based lifting. It's more by feel. And we've done it a few times and people get pretty strong.
Yeah, I'd say, if people are really fixated on it, you could do week 1, day 1 is going to be your first day of deadlift progression, your first high rep deadlift day. If you want to sneak it in there, that's going to be fine. I would just make that like the last time you do that, or just use something recent there. But, the major goal of this phase is to turn that 1 rep max deadlift, do a decent volume of high rep deadlifts, and turn that 1 rep max into a 3 rep max. And that's just, again, to prove to athletes how much fitter they've gotten. With all of our 1 rep maxes, the eventual goal is to turn 1 rep maxes into 2, into 3, into 5, into 10. So, it should be a really fun phase, and it's a fan favorite. So your gym's going to be packed on those deadlift days. It's an opportunity for you to bring a good vibe there and really, make the community appreciate the value of being able to pull something really heavy off the floor and what that does for their fitness.
Yeah. That is the lift only day. So like athletes can expect there's not going to be a cardio piece in there, but we are bringing back the beach season pump sessions. So after that, what will end up being one really, really heavy kind of high rep set of deadlifts. Athletes get to get their pump on.
Did you put calf raises in any of those days?
Oh, I should. I'm doing them now
do
too.
it real
All right, I'll change
edit
it now.
those real quick.
Uploaded.
All right.
Boop.
Secondly, our skill lift of the phase is going to be positional power clean, because we're going to try to take the strength that we develop in the deadlift and the high CNS and the skill work from the power clean positional work, combine those two forces together and create a new 1 rep max clean and jerk in the following phase. So for this phase, we're going to do some positional work. One of the things we did last year, I'm sure affiliates were like, God, again, we're doing this. It was a lot of positional snatch work, but then we saw the benefits, the fruits of that labor after like 16 weeks of snatch work. People who have been members at our gym for upwards of 8 to 10 years are PRing a lift they hadn't PR'd since 2012. So
Myself included.
2012. So again, the real focus when you see skill lift in the sheet in your programming is to remind athletes that the skill unlocks your strength. If you do not have the requisite skill to move the barbell proficiently, that your ceiling is kind of like you talked about earlier, is just going to effectively lower, kind of like the strict pull-up thing with the kipping pull-up. So again, air athletes on the side of moving well, and there'll be some days where they have permission to build a little bit more. Maybe you drop off a position later in the phase because we've done it enough times now that we can kind of couple warm-up reps in there, and now we can move on to something a little bit heavier. But really try to, coaches hold the leashes a little bit tighter there so they're not, off the reins and able to just turn every single skill day into 1 rep max, because again, that is not where adaptation and change happens. When it comes to the Olympic lifts, somewhere between like 60 and 80% is where the bread and butter, meat and potatoes are of getting better at that lift occurs. So, that's kind of the general guise we're going to have when it comes to the positional work.
Yeah, the that positional stuff is so important, and kind of going back to everything builds over the course of the year. Most of the times that skill lift, whatever skill lift you see in the current phase, there's a good chance that it is going to turn into the high CNS lift the next phase. So athletes, they will get basically 12 straight weeks of clean work. In this phase, it's the positional kind of based with a power clean variant. And then, like you said, in the next phase, we've got a fun clean and jerk phase.
I need it
again. Trying to, you and me both. Moving on to the gymnastics work. So the gymnastics test for the phase is going to involve handstand walking, and we're going to go back and forth each week between being upside down and also kind of being upside down, but on a GHD. So the GHD work, the handstand walk work, is just designed to get athletes comfortable upside down. We've talked about this before in handstand walk teaching progressions, but athletes who can support themselves upside down can probably handstand walk, or at least start to practice, because it's much more of a neurological thing than, a strength thing per se. So athletes can practice their handstand walking, and then on the other weeks, we've got GHD work, which is outside. It's not in a Metcon because we know that a lot of affiliates out there, maybe you only have one GHD. We're blessed to have a couple, but we still have to rotate, athletes in through them just because of how, we only have a couple of them. So GHD work to get athletes exposed to the machine, and if nothing else, teach them how to do the movements that are done on the GHD, which is something they can do outside of class. We talked about that before. If they're looking for, additional midline type work, obviously coaches should be moderating that pretty closely, especially with the sit-up for safety purposes. But it's a good machine. Everybody has one. I don't know how many affiliate athletes don't know how to use it because it never gets programmed. And that's why we programmed it.
Yeah, I think it also, there's still that level of if I need abs, I must do sit-ups kind of thing. And I would always rather teach someone how to do it safely and make them fully understand the risks and benefits associated with that machine versus just that's the rounded water ball holder over in the corner there. Don't go over there. I wouldn't touch that kind of thing. It's, any bit of our equipment in our gym, at some point you should have the opportunity to teach a member how to use safely. So again, we talked about using the open and quarterfinals and those athletes trying to go from the open to the quarterfinals. If they're going to be sprinkling GHDs in there, it would be shame on us for not preparing an athlete through some exposure occasionally to that machine. So again, there'll be a huge variance in capacities in your gym, and, we'll have media surrounding how to make sure it's appropriate for those athletes. But, everybody in true spirit of CrossFit, should be exposed to as many different things as possible, and GHD is another one of those elements. Moving on to our auxiliary and GPP lift, we've got back squat. Now, we often, we make a joke about this at Misfit Athletics, but with our individual athletes, how often do you get to do a back squat in our sport? And the answer is never. Basically never, unless you're at the CrossFit Games.
I was really banking on that this open seat. I was feeling good after the 5x5s that we were doing.
We'll get it this year.
Yeah.
But the main reason we back squat, other than the fact that it's a great expression of, hip, ankle, and knee mobility, and it's a great way to drive just overall strength, is that, we want to be able to take that strength we cultivate in the back squat, the pulling we figure out in the deadlift, and the positional work in the clean, and those things kind of morph together and create our clean and our heavy clean and for our clean and jerk. So, we want to make sure athletes are getting regular exposure there, because we do hear it from our athletes occasionally, even at HQ, that if we haven't squatted in a while, like, hey, I feel a little rusty here and I'd like to have some confidence. And one of our favorite ways to show people that, you don't need to have some crazy like small off junior squat program every single phase, is to just sprinkle it in here and there and then test it randomly on, a day and be like, all right, see, you still have all your strength. Like,
how many athletes PR'd their deadlift this past week after, I
think both gyms were at like 65, 70%. And this is, again, members from brand new to been here for 10, 12 years. And that's just another, nod to the variance gods. Like, I want to make sure I get plenty of variance. I work on my general physical preparedness, and look at that, PR my deadlift, and the same thing goes for your back squat. So we're going to sprinkle those in throughout the phase, and it's going to be a regular thing that you see, but you aren't going to be following any specific like linear progression or like, percentage work. And then we're also going to have some strict press in there, because, a lot of athletes realize really quickly in something like a wall walk that all of a sudden my shoulders just go away and I can't keep doing them. Or, I'm a thruster and I just couldn't lock the bar out towards the end. That happened to me. So, in order to get better at pressing, you must press. So you're going to see a fair amount of pressing in this phase as well, because again, we're going to work on some of the strength stuff, some of the higher rep stuff, and some positional stuff, so that those things kind of all mesh together to be able to go high rep for low weight and, very heavy for 1 or 2 reps. So a good mix of pressing in this upcoming training phase.
And then lastly, I'll just hit on these last 2 notes. One of the features of the program is that we include and kind of like occasionally remind ourselves to make sure we get some in-workout lifting, which means either, the barbell is intentionally a little bit heavier, but more often than not, it's kind of a percentage-based thing so that athletes can personalize it. So, for example, when, a 22.2 comes up with that deadlift, and maybe 225 or 155 can become a more of a Metcon weight rather than a percentage. Like, it's like, wow, that's 80% of my deadlift. Our goal with the in-workout lifting stuff is to give athletes the chance to breathe heavy and then pick up a heavier percentage of a lift that they might not always get to do in kind of a typical conditioning piece. But some weeks we've got that. Other weeks we've got a lot of cardio type workouts coming up. Combination of, different energy systems on different machines, but you're going to see a lot of workouts where it's just like burpees and machine work.
My favorite.
Box jumps, rowing, and burpees, like you guys will find in the conditioning test for the week. But it's very simply, how hard do you want to work? And that also is like, for the athletes who can do all of those things, bummer. It's how fast can you go? For everybody else, it's like, none of these movements are going to slow me down, and therefore I can really move the needle on my fitness because, there's no ring muscle up to slow me down. There's no heavy barbell that I can't lift that I need to scale. It's just how hard can I work? And then for our competitor extra piece, pretty much all of those pieces are going to rotate between some gymnastics skill work, some cardio, some CrossFit, but there will be a snatch day once per week. Similar to the back squat and strict press, there is no specific progression. We're just making sure athletes who are, have that kind of desire to do maybe a little bit extra outside of class, that we're kind of maintaining that GPP focus year round, so we're not focusing on the snatch specifically, but for those athletes, they get to do it once a week in some form or another. I think we did it.
So,
anything else you guys want to add about the upcoming training phase?
Upcoming training phase? No, but one thing we did just drop the other day is our free on-ramp program from Team Misfit. That is a 3-week long program that we run currently at our gym. It could be adopted to a 4-week program if you prefer to do it on the monthly basis. One of the things that's unique about our gym here is that, we had members who signed on to our gym, went through a 4-week on-ramp, and they were like very nervous to commit to the next month because they hadn't been in class yet. So we've since adopted our program to be 3 days a week, where the 4th week they kind of jump just into class and become, regular old members, because that is often
with their beginner's coach.
With their beginner's coach. And that's a really important feature, because again, it is no different in our minds, but to them, to leave the comforts of the nest and to go into out into the world is sometimes a little bit scary. So this is a program that is designed to help take an athlete from zero CrossFit experience at all and work them way into all of the, not to say all of them, but most of the things that you would need to be able to do to be able to take CrossFit class with everybody else. It's a great way to get someone introduced to CrossFit, and it's a dose of workouts that's appropriate for someone who's brand new. And honestly, even if you aren't new to CrossFit and you've been doing it for a long time, if you went as hard as you could in some of those workouts, you'd find them to be pretty terrible, specifically, a couple of days on that sheet.
Still waiting for us to program the beginners week.
That'll be coming up at some point. But again, it's just meant to be a tool for you coaches out there, you affiliates out there that maybe piecemeal your beginners program, or you do like one-on-one session and you jump right into class there. We have found with very good success that when the program ramps people up slowly and kind of introduces them day by day and gives them kind of what I would recommend for the beginner, the 3-day-a-week kind of experience to kind of create that habit early on. We've just seen really good adoption of those beginners becoming full-fledged members. So again, feel free to steal it, borrow it, change it a little bit, but it's a really great program for someone who's looking to help someone go from zero CrossFit to being a CrossFit gym class member.
Yeah, you guys are both our beginners coaches here at kind of Team Misfit HQ, and have adapted it to also include, it not only includes like just the movements, like coaches think like, oh, we need to take this green beginner and make sure they know how to do these movements, and that's absolutely part of it. But we also need to be asking these people about things like, hey, what are your goals? What's your current lifestyle like? What's your nutrition like? Because that's how we really move the needle for those people, and from a business perspective, help retain them. If we're only teaching them, hey, this is a wall ball, sit down, throw that to the target, like that's not a whole lot of value. But when we start to ask athletes about their goals, we make sure that we're introducing them to the CrossFit terminology, so that when they do jump into the regular class, they're not, totally lost. All of those things are kind of included in the beginners program. So if you are a subscriber, if you didn't know, you can get that for free. That's already part of your subscription. But if you're not a subscriber, for a limited amount of time, you can download it for free. And if you just go to the @TeamMisfitGyms Instagram, head to our bio, there's a little button that says free on-ramp program. You just enter your email, download it totally for free. And you can include that as part of your, maybe you steal from it, maybe you take bits and pieces from it, but it's a great time to like introduce that kind of concurrently with the new training phase.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right. Thanks for listening, guys. Again, you can head to teammisfit.com or the SugarWOD Marketplace to sign up for Team Misfit affiliate programming. Make sure you follow us at Team Misfit Gyms, as well as the Team Misfit Gyms YouTube channel, or rather the Team Misfit YouTube channel, where we're constantly putting out coaching content, how to coach this, efficiency tips, all those sorts of things. So even if you're not a subscriber and you're a coach looking to kind of increase your proficiency and kind of professional development, all good resources there. But we're looking forward to baseline training phase 1. We'll see you guys next time.
Peace.